Hello, welcome back to our video series on the ARP 2600B synthesizer. Today we're talking about the sample and hold module. One of the few instances when we were dealing with the VCOs when we had to jump over something, said, no, let's just not worry about that right now, it'll confuse us. It's definitely a subject in its own right, and we're going to deal with that today. So without further ado, what does it do? Well, it does exactly what it says on the label. It takes a snapshot of an incoming signal, either an audible signal or a low frequency modulating signal, it doesn't matter, a value, a signal. It takes a snapshot of it and says this is the level that you're currently at, and then for a period of time it will output that level. After that period of time has elapsed, it will take a new snapshot. So imagine this wave is happening in the background, and every, let's say, half a second, it takes a snapshot of where the wave currently is, and then for the next half second will output exactly that signal, and then it will change to the new signal, and it will keep doing that. So sample, snapshot, hold, period of time elapses, new snapshot, hold that. The best way to demonstrate it is with the use of a sine wave LFO. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this output from the LFO down here, and I'm going to drop it into this jack right here. So it's labeled noise gen, and the noise gen, this fella over here, is the default pre-wired connection into the sample and hold generator, but we've just overridden that with a sine wave. I've also prepared VCO2 with a really simple, straightforward square wave sound going into the VCF. And there it is. Now the reason I've chosen VCO2 is it's one of the two oscillators, 1 and 2, are pre-wired with sample and hold outputs. So this slider here is already normaled to the sample and hold module. Okay, so let's play a note, see what happens. You hear that stepped sound? It's playing distinct tones very quickly. Have a look at this rate slider down here. So there you can hear it taking a slice of the sound. We've got a sine wave going on in the background. 3 times a second it's taking a snapshot of where that sine wave is, and then it's sending that control voltage out to this connection, to this jack here, which is then having an effect on the pitch of the tone being generated by VCO2. So naturally we have a nice simple square wave, but then this staggered modulation effect is being applied to the sound, to the pitch. So we've just dealt with the first of our jacks over here. This is our input. We can take any source that we want into this jack here, and that will be the wave that's going to get photographed every 2.8 seconds. So we could take it from the LF, the low frequency triangle wave of VCO3. So I've just really slowed VCO3 down. So now the steps aren't really identifiable anymore, but they're still there. There they are. If I make this much faster, So now that VCO is cycling maybe 100 times a second, like way beyond anything that's like the pattern identifiable. The sample and hold generator is still doing its thing 2.84 times a second. I think I got that wrong earlier. It's taking this snapshot and it's outputting that level, whatever it may be. Now, because our input signal is now really fast, it's essentially random. You've got no idea where on the curve it's actually taking a snapshot. And I'm willing to wager that if I take this cable out, there'll be very little effect on the sound. Because now we have a random modulation source coming in. It's now noise, which is genuinely random. Interesting, the difference between the two. That's a fixed set of frequencies that's being snapshotted, as opposed to noise, which is totally random. So we're hearing different points on the triangle curve, but it's always a triangle, as opposed to something that's completely random. Never actually done that before. That was cool. So each one of these waves will have its own like signature, and it's a little bit like join the dots. If you put all those frequencies together, eventually you'll get the shape of the saw wave. Interesting. That's cool. Okay, what else have we got? In addition to the sample and hold module outputting its signal, and don't forget that's a normaled output here, but we also have the corresponding jack. So this sample and hold output jack here, we haven't done anything to the signal whatsoever. It's already going in there. We've just taken an explicit source instead. So that's exactly the same. This internal clock out, which is a very unfortunate choice of naming, it confuses the heck out of me. This is the sample and hold module's internal clock output, which is in itself a square wave. So basically, we've got another square wave that we can play with as we like. And see, there's a little picture of a square wave there. So if we take this output instead and throw that over there, it's now on-offing 2.84 times a second. So it's having this extreme voltage based, it's still a modulation source that's going into a frequency modulation. So it's changing the pitch of VCO2. It's doing it very dramatically from maximum as much as it can to as little as it can, as determined by this clock rate here. Now this clock output here is fixed and is controlled by this slider. And that's like I say, that's an internal like module based thing. But the sample and hold generator itself, you can override this clock. So let's go back to this random nonsense as being controlled by this slider. Let's set that really, really fast. And now we'll take an LFO output and plug it in here. Now we're controlling the speed of the sample and hold generator with an external clock, in our case the LFO's clock. So without anything being plugged in here, it's this. The moment you plug something into that socket, it takes whatever that clock rate is instead, and it's this one down here. Okay. So that's it for the left hand side. These are all to do with controlling the input to and output from the sample and hold module. All of the controls on the right hand side are concerned with the Electro Switch. Get ourselves back to a default position. That's not default at all, is it? There we go. Okay. If we play with the filter on this thing just for a moment. Okay, that's our sound. Now then, that's all coming out of VCO2. So to demonstrate how the Electro Switch works, I'm going to use VCO3. I'm going to turn it into LFO mode. And I'm going to take two different outputs. One is a sawtooth, and I'm going to plug it into switch A. The other is a sine wave, and I'm going to plug it into switch B. Now, what's going to happen is that every twice a second, or we'll set it at 1.5 hertz for the moment. Whatever this clock rate is currently set to, it's going to toggle, the sample and hold module is going to toggle between A and B, and that switch is going to have its wave-based effect on the output. It's easier to show it you than explain it to you. Here's the output. It's I don't understand what they were doing when they labelled this jack. There isn't really actually a label for it, but this is your output from your switch. It's done diagrammatically with this little symbol here. So we come out of that, and let's go into one of our control inputs on our filter. So now this slider is doing something crazy. So what it's doing is it's spending a couple of seconds having a sine wave filter effect on the tone, and then a couple of seconds having a sawtooth filter effect on the tone, and it's toggling between those two things. So the sharp bing bing is when the inverted saw is kicking in. You get the filter effect doing the filter sweep, and then it's switching over to sine wave and doing the sine curve sweep. And you can see that as I'm changing the frequency of the VCO3's LFO, you can hear it toggling between those two effects. However fast it's running, it's always toggling at the same rate, this rate. So this frequency control over here is determining what the filter sounds like when A or B has control of the filter, and this slider down here is controlling how regularly it toggles between A and B. And eventually you just get some crazy stuff. So I can imagine putting that to musical use. You know, that's the whole point of the Electro Switch, to give you that toggling effect. Finally, the external clock in on this side of the sample and hold module is a means to override the speed of the switching. So if we go back to our LFO, plug that in there. Now the speed at which it toggles between source A and source B is being controlled by the LFO. I don't think I covered sample this level slider here, but that's how much of an effect the sample and hold generator is having on the output signal. That's pretty straightforward stuff. So a very cool module, a little bit different from the norm, and now we've filled in those little gaps. So all of our sound sources now, including the sample and hold module, have been covered. Next time we'll deal with the voltage processor, this module over here, sat right next door. I hope you'll join me for that. Thanks very much for watching. See you next time.